When I picked up the phone that evening, I only meant to ask my son, Adam, a simple question: so when's the big day? His wedding had been on my mind for months. I had even circled possible dates on my calendar, waiting for him and Lisa to finally set it. But before Adam could answer, Lisa looked me dead in the eye, and with a smile that felt like a knife twisting in my chest, "We only invited special people who was land." They crushed me. Special people. I froze there in my own living room, the phone still pressed to my ear like it weighed a 1,000 pounds. For 3 years I had covered their rent every month, $500 without fail. I had bought them furniture, paid for repairs in their apartment, filled their fridge when they couldn't afford groceries. Yet apparently I wasn't special enough to stand beside my only son on the most important day of his life. Adam wouldn't even look me in the eyes. He stared at the floor like a guilty child, while Lisa made herself comfortable on the very sofa I had bought for them. Upstairs in my closet hung the pale blue suit I had carefully chosen for his wedding day. Next to it were polished shoes I had splurged on, imagining how I would look standing proudly in his wedding photographs. Those photographs would now be complete without me in them. I had planned everything: the outfit, a heartfelt wedding gift of $1,000, even a little speech I hoped to give at the reception. I had called my sister in Chicago to share the happy news, tidied my house from top to bottom, believing they might come here afterward for a family celebration. All of that planning, all of that joy, erased in an instant by 4 poisoned words: only special people. People. Adam finally spoke, but his voice was stiff, rehearsed, as if he had practiced excuses. "Dad, it was just a small, intimate thing, just us and the witnesses," but I knew he was lying. Social media betrayed them. I had seen the photographs: Lisa's parents beaming beside the bride and groom, her siblings clinking glasses of champagne. I had even recognized Lisa's white dress, the one I had unknowingly financed, not with the BABA dollars I'd given her last month for personal expenses. I wasn't supposed to see any of it, yet I had seen enough to understand the truth. I wasn't part of their family. Not really. I was just the wallet that kept their lives afloat. 7 days later, my phone rang again. This time Lisa's voice had none of its earlier arrogance. She sounded desperate, shaky, even scared. "Richard, the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll evict us." "You forgot the transfer." "Forgort? Aufgort?" No, for once I hadn't forgotten. I had chosen not to. For years I had rushed to the bank, canceled my own plans, eaten beans and rice just to make sure they had a roof over their heads. Now, after being shut out of my own Sarah's wedding, after being shut out of my own son's wedding, she had the audacity to call me as though nothing had happened. I let the silence linger long enough for her to feel it. Then I said calmly, almost coldly, Lisa, didn't I warn you I only help special people?" The line went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, it wasn't me trembling. It was her, she stammered. "Richard, I don't understand. We're special to you. You've always said I was like a daughter." Lies. Sweetly packaged, but lies all the same. She had used that same syrupy tone when asking me for money for her wedding dress, for their honeymoon, for rings I never got to see exchanged. For 3 years I had walked on eggshells, measuring every word, every gesture, hoping for even a crumb of genuine affection. Instead, I became the silent provider, the perfect father who never complained while they treated me like a shadow. But those 4 words, only special people, cracked something deep inside me. That night, after hanging up the phone, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, but not the usual tears of disappointment I'd shed in private before. This time, I cried out of anger, of humiliation accumulated over years, of realizing how much of myself I had lost in the name of being indispensable to people who considered me disposable. When I woke the next morning, something inside me had shifted. The man staring back from the bathroom mirror had the same tired eyes, the same lines carved from years of sacrifice. But there was something new, a steel in his gaze I hadn't seen in decades. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone, didn't wonder if Adam had called to apologize, didn't hope for reconciliation. For the first time, I thought about myself first. Unbiblical. I brewed coffee and sat at the dining table, the same table where I had so often counted bills for their expenses. Only this time I wasn't planning for Adam and Lisa's lives. I was beginning to plan for my own. And though my house was silent, it was the most beautiful silence I had ever heard. I often tell myself that betrayal doesn't arrive in a single blow. It creeps in slowly, disguised as help, as just this once, as we'll pay you back next month. By the time you realize it, years have slipped through your fingers, and the sacrifices you made for love have become the very chains that tie you down. Looking back, I can trace every dollar, every sacrifice, every silent compromise. And together they told a story I had been too blind or too hopeful to see. When Adam and Lisa first moved in together, they were struggling. Rent was Waibate month, and they claimed they were drowning. I still remember the night Adam came over, pacing in my kitchen like a boy again. Dad, we just need a little help until Lisa finds steady work. A couple of months, that's all. A couple of months turned into 3 years. I wired that Y-bollard every month without fail, 36 payments. Our server gone, each transfer felt like duty. Each receipt felt like proof that I was still useful, still part of Adam's life. But it didn't stop at rent, groceries too. Adam would call sheepish, explaining they were short on money for the week. I'd fill their fridge with meats, vegetables, snacks, even wine when I felt generous. $200 here, another $200 there. Over time, those little trips to the store added up to more than $T ling. Then came the special occasions. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. Every time, I tried to make up for the love I wasn't receiving with something wrapped in shiny paper and a bow, a new watch for Adam, jewelry for Lisa, a surprise weekend getaway, my tally for those 3 years, at least $700 ling, and emergencies. There were always emergencies. Lisa's dental procedure, batty dollars, their broken down car, our wood bat for a loan that was never repaid, an air conditioner unit that gave out during a heat wave, low by dollars, furniture for their living room when they wanted to start fresh, $. Arbecht, when I finally sat down and added it all together, the number was staggering. $100 and Sursan, see by $33,000. Money I had saved from my years of work after your mother died. Money that was supposed to secure my retirement, to let me travel, maybe even see Europe. Money that could have bought me peace of mind. Instead, it had bought Adam and Lisa comfort. What did I receive in return? A few thanks, Dad muttered without eye contact. Lisa's sweet smile when she needed something. And Adam, my only son, growing more and more distant, as though every dollar I gave him built another wall between us. I used to sit at my table with a calculator, working out how much I could spare for them without leaving myself short. Beans and rice for me, steak for them, my heating bill delayed so their Wi-Fi stayed connected. My house untouched, the same wallpaper peeling in the hallway, while their apartment got fresh coats of paint and a flat screen television. Still, I convinced myself it was worth it. This was family, this was love, this was what fathers did. Or so I thought. The wedding was supposed to be the reward. I imagined myself walking into that ceremony, maybe even giving a toast, looking around at their friends and saying, "See? That's my boy, that's the man I raised." I pictured myself handing Adam the envelope with $1,000 inside, smiling at his surprise, knowing I had been there for every step of the journey. But that dream had been stolen, replaced with a sickening truth. All my sacrifice had earned me nothing but exclusion. For weeks after hearing the words "only special people," I replayed my own foolishness in my head. The numbers haunted me. I saw the receipts stacked like gravestones. Each one represented a piece of my life that I had given away, not to love, not to gratitude, but to greed and manipulation. I wasn't just hurt, I was humiliated. Imagine being told you're not special by the very people who lived off your sacrifices. Imagine scrolling through photos of a wedding you weren't invited to, recognizing half the things you paid for, watching strangers beam in a celebration you financed but weren't welcome to attend. It was like watching my own obituary, and yet I had stayed quiet. For years I had been the easy father, the one who never raised his voice, never questioned where the money went, never demanded respect in return. I thought patience would be rewarded, I thought kindness would come back to me. But as the totals added up in my notebook, another realization struck me. I had been financing my own erasure. Every dollar spent was a step further from the man I used to be, the man who once had hobbies, dreams, a sense of independence. I had traded all of that for the illusion of closeness with a son who saw me not as a father, but as an endless fountain of cash. The truth hit me harder than Lisa's cruel words. This wasn't just their betrayal. It was my own failure to see what was happening, and that realization would become the spark that changed everything. Because a man can only be humiliated so many times before something inside him hardens. And for me, that hardening had just begun. The call came a week after the secret wedding. I remember staring at the screen, Lisa's name glowing in bold letters. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let the silence speak for me, but curiosity, or maybe habit, won. I answered. Her tone was different this time. Gone was the smug confidence of the woman who had told me I wasn't special. In its place was desperation, a kind of thinly veiled panic. "Richard," she began, voice trembling, The rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, we'll be out on the street. You forgot to send the transfer, Gort. As if it were a chore like taking out the trash that I had simply overlooked, but no, I hadn't forgotten. For once in 3 years I had chosen not to press that button at the bank. I let a pause linger long enough for her to notice. Then, with a calm that surprised even me, I said, "Yo, Lisa, didn't I tell you I only help special people?" Silence. The kind that fills a room like smoke, choking every word before it's spoken. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one squirming on the line. It was her. "Richard, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You've said it yourself. I'm like a daughter to you, a daughter." Funny how that word had always come up right before she needed something. For years, she had used it like a magic charm, a key that unlocked my wallet. Her sweet voice, her soft words, they were never about me, they were about what I could provide. And in that moment, I finally saw it for what it was. I ended the call with a simple, firm goodbye. When I put the phone down, my hand wasn't trembling, my pulse wasn't racing. There was no guilt, no rush of panic telling me to fix their lives once again. For the first time in a very long time, I felt free. That night, instead of tossing in bed worrying about how they would survive, I pulled out my old notebooks. I began calculating, not for their sake, but for mine. Line by line, I added the figures. Rent, Sherbaz, Lingtowans, food, $T, Urbeck gifts, $Sem, Ling Loans, Loans, and emergencies over WOV dollars, Lingthowans, furniture, repairs, odds and ends. By the time I totaled it all, the number mocked me, Senzersan Seabat. I stared at it, stunned. $33,000, gone 3 years of my retirement savings, drained. 3 years of the life my late wife and I had dreamed of. Traveling, gardening, maybe buying a little cabin near the lake, traded for the empty promise of being needed. I realized then that I hadn't just lost money, I had lost myself. For 3 years I had made Adam and Lisa's life the center of mine. Every transfer, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had been a desperate attempt to hold on to my son. I thought that if I gave enough, he would see me. That if I paid enough, I could buy my place in his heart. But love doesn't work like that. It never has. The next morning, I woke with a strange clarity. My routine had always been the same. Make coffee, check the phone for Adam's calls, brace myself for whatever new crisis awaited me. But that day, I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the smell. I didn't check the phone. I didn't think about Adam's rent, Lisa's shopping, or anyone else's needs but my own. For the first time in years, my first thought was simply, what do I want today? I sat at the kitchen table, the same place I had spent countless hours planning their survival, and instead planned my own. I listed the things I had given up, hobbies, friends, trips I had postponed. I wrote down places I still wanted to see, books I still wanted to read, projects I had abandoned, and as I wrote, I felt something awaken inside me. A hardness, yes, but also a determination. The next step was obvious. I drove to the bank where I had been wiring money every month. The manager, a kind man named Mr. Klein, looked at me with surprise when I said, "Yo, I need to cancel all automatic transfers to Adam and Lisa, and I want to make sure no one but me has access to my accounts." "Are you sure, Mr. Richter?" he asked gently. "This has been regular for years." "Yes," I said firmly, "I'm sure. For once, I'm sure." As he processed the paperwork, my phone buzzed again and again. Adam, Lisa. Then Adam again. It was as if they sensed, like predators, that the easy meal was about to disappear. I turned the phone face down on the desk and let it ring. When the forms were signed, I walked out of that bank feeling 10 pounds lighter. It was as though I had left not just paperwork behind, but years of guilt and obligation. For the first time, my money and my life belonged to me. On the drive home, the world looked different. The streets were the same, the sky the same shade of gray, but I noticed things I hadn't before. The park where I used to take Adam when he was a boy. The corner store where he'd beg me for candy. Memories surfaced, bittersweet reminders of a child who once saw me as a hero, not a paycheck. Somewhere along the line, that little boy had disappeared. In his place stood a grown man who saw his father only as a means to an end. But as the memories washed over me, one truth settled deep in my chest. I couldn't buy that little boy back. I couldn't pay enough to make him return. All I could do now was reclaim the man I had lost, myself. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low, no calls answered, no texts returned. Just me and the sound of silence. A silence that used to terrify me, but now felt like a blessing. It wasn't the silence of abandonment, it was the silence of freedom. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. So when I glanced out the window and saw Adam's car parked in front of my house, my stomach tightened. Behind it was Lisa's car, and beside hers, a sleek gray sedan I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but then I saw movement inside. They had keys. Of course, they had keys. I had given them to Adam months ago just in case, never imagining they would use them against me. By the time I opened the door, they were already inside. Adam sat slouched on my sofa, head in his hands, like a teenager waiting for punishment. Lisa paced the living room, her eyes sharp, her movements jittery, like a predator trapped in too small a cage. At my dining table, a man in a gray suit flipped through my personal papers as if they were his own. "What's happening here?" I demanded, my voice louder than I expected. They all turned. For a moment, it was as if I were the intruder in my own house. Lisa spoke first. "Richard, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher, an attorney we've been consulting about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. "What situation?" "I'm doing perfectly fine." Adam finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot, his voice practiced. "Dad, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers, and you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that." The lawyer stood, his hand extended. "Mr. Richter, I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being. They asked me to assess whether you may need assistance managing your financial decisions." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked past him and gathered the papers he had been shuffling through. My bills, my bank statements, my late wife's will. I clutched them to my chest. "These are my private documents." "You have no right to touch them, Dad," Adam said, his voice dripping with practiced patience. "We're worried. First, you cut us off without a word, then you don't answer our calls. That's not normal, we think." "Maybe you need help?" Lisa approached, her tone sugar-coated. "Richard, sweetheart, we love you. But we can't ignore the signs. At your age, confusion is common. It's nothing to be ashamed of." The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. I finally understood. This wasn't concern, this was strategy. They wanted to paint me as incompetent, to take over my finances by force if they couldn't get them by guilt. I straightened my back and spoke with a clarity that silenced them. "I am not confused. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now, Mr. Richter," Fisher interrupted, using that calm, professional tone lawyers use when they think they're in control. "If your ability to make rational financial decisions is impaired, your family has a legal right to intervene. They've documented troubling behaviors." I cut him off with a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Troubling behaviors, like deciding my money belongs to me? Like choosing not to fund two fully grown adults who treat me like garbage?" Lisa jumped, offended. "We never treated you badly. Your family, everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process." There it was, the naked truth. To them, I wasn't a father, I wasn't even a person. I was a wallet with an expiration date. They were already counting down the days until my funeral, planning what they would do with the money I had worked my whole life to save. "Out," I said, pointing to the door, "all three of you now." Adam rose to his feet, his face twisted in anger. "Dad, we can't just leave. We have obligations, the rent, the car, the credit cards you company signed for. You can't cut us off overnight." I shot back, my voice rising for the first time, "and I have. For years I paid rent that wasn't mine. I filled fridges in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that had no place for me. That ends now." Fisher calmly pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. Mr. Richter, we've prepared documents that would make this transition smoother. A power of attorney giving Adam and Lisa authority to manage your finances. It would only be temporary. Without opening it, I took the folder and tossed it into the trash. The only transition happening here is you to the front door." Lisa's eyes welled with tears, but I knew better than to be moved. I knew better than to be moved, but I knew better than to be moved. I had seen those tears before. They weren't sadness, they were frustration, rage barely contained. "You can't do this, Richard," she snapped. "We made plans based on your support. We took on expenses because we knew we could count on you. Plans built on my money," I said. "Not my love, not my happiness, not my presence, just my money. And now that it's gone, suddenly I'm a confused old man who needs guardianship." Adam tried one last time. He stepped toward me, his voice soft, almost pleading. "Dad, we made mistakes. The wedding, it was Lisa's nerves. I should have stood up for you, but we can fix this. Please be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I spat the word. "Being reasonable means paying for your lives while you shut me out of mine. It means pretending it didn't break me to be excluded from the most important day of my son's life. If that's reasonable, then I never want to be reasonable again." Fisher closed his briefcase with a snap. "Mr. Richter, this isn't over. Your children have options. If a judge determines you're unfit to manage your finances, guardianship will be assigned. I stared him down. Then I suggest you do your homework before threatening a man who has managed his money flawlessly for 40 years, raised a son alone after his wife's death, and supported 2 able-bodied adults until last week. Lisa's tears vanished. Her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. This won't stay like this, Richard. We have rights and lawyers, then hire them, I said, with your own money, because mine is off limits. They left with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to hearing the word no. At the door, Adam turned one last time. His voice was low, almost a growl. This is going to end badly for you. You'll end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. I met his gaze with a sadness so deep it almost surprised me. Adam, I said quietly, the only difference is now it's by choice, not by your neglect. When the door shut behind them, silence fell. But this silence was not empty. It was alive. It was freedom. And for the first time in years, I felt strong enough to fight for it. The next morning, I woke with the uneasy feeling of a man who knew the storm wasn't over. Adam and Lisa weren't the type to walk away quietly. I could practically hear Lisa's voice in my head, rehearsing her arguments, planning her next move. If yesterday had been a battle, I knew a war was coming. That's why my first stop was the office of an old acquaintance, Mr. Weber. Years earlier, when my wife passed, he had helped me settle her will. A steady man in his 60s. Weber carried himself with the calm of someone who had seen every kind of family fight. When I told him what happened, the invasion of my house, the lawyer, the threats, he leaned back in his chair, sighed, and folded his hands. Richard, he slow hypershare financial crime. Richard, he said slowly, what you've described as a name, elder financial abuse. And it's a federal crime. The words hit me like a jolt of cold water. Abuse. I'd thought of it as betrayal, manipulation, greed. But hearing it in legal terms, defined and categorized, gave it a new weight. This wasn't just my guilt-ridden imagination. It was real. It was serious. They're trying to set the stage to declare you incompetent, Weber continued. What a way, Capitan. The stage clays, Weber continued. That's why they brought in Fisher. That's why they keep using words like confused and stable. It's textbook. I've seen it before. I shook my head, struggling to accept the reality. My own son, trying to strip me of my rights. How does a man prepare for that? You don't prepare, Richard. You defend and you document everything. We spent hours combing through my bank records, receipts, every transfer I'd made to Adam and Lisa. When Weber added up the numbers, he let out a long whistle. $33,400 in 3 years. That's not just generosity, that's full financial support. You've been keeping them alive while they plot against you. Hearing someone else say it, put into black and white, stung worse than I expected. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been used. Weber leaned forward. Here's what we do. First, cancel every automatic transfer. Second, change your locks. Third, install a security system. And fourth, create a new account at a different bank. If they're this desperate, they'll try again. We cut off every avenue of access. I nodded, feeling both anxious and strangely alive. For the first time, I wasn't playing defense out of fear. I was planning a counterattack. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store. Mr. Summers, the owner, knew me well. I'd been a regular there, buying tools and supplies whenever Adam's apartment needed fixing. He smiled when he saw me. Another emergency with your boy? Not this time, I replied firmly. This one's for me. I need the best locks you've got and a new set of keys. Only for me. He raised his eyebrows but didn't ask questions. While I was choosing, his son Ethan, a young man who installed security systems, came over. Mr. Richter, if you're changing locks, maybe you should think about cameras too. Full coverage, motion sensors, alarms, the works. For the first time in a long time, I said the words, price isn't the issue. Just give me peace of mind. The next day, while Ethan set up cameras around the property, I heard a knock at the door. I braced myself, half expecting Adam and Lisa again, but it wasn't them. It was my neighbor, Eleanor Brooks. A woman in her late 60s with kind eyes. She held a steaming mug in her hands. Mr. Richter, she said gently, I heard shouting from your house the other night. I wanted to make sure you're all right. Something about her sincerity, simple, unpolished, without hidden motives, nearly undid me. I invited her in, and over coffee I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her eyes filling with tears. When I finished, she touched my arm and said, "You did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter years ago. I thought she wouldn't love me if I didn't help financially. But when I finally cut her off, she learned to stand on her own. And we built a relationship on respect, not money." Her words sank deep. Respect, not money. That was what I had been craving all along. That evening, instead of sitting alone with my bitterness, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took care of myself. I went to the barbershop downtown, the same one I'd avoided for months, telling myself I couldn't afford it because Adam and Lisa needed the money. The barber, an old friend named Charlie, grinned when I walked in. Well, look who finally remembered he's got hair. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. I got the full treatment, cut, shave, even a splash of aftershave that smelled like cedar and spice. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a man I recognized but hadn't seen in a long time. A man who looked alive again. Later, I dug out my old sketchbooks. Before life had become about paying bills for others, I used to draw landscapes, portraits, little moments of life. I sat at the table, pencil in hand, and let the lines take me back to who I was before the burden of helping consumed me. It felt like breathing again. In the days that followed, I started building a new routine. Walks through the park, not to run errands for Adam, but just for the sake of walking. Long phone calls with my sister in Chicago, reconnecting after years of distance. Afternoons spent with Eleanor and her friends. Women and men who had their own stories of being used by family and finding freedom. Each step was small, but together they built something powerful, the sense that my life was mine again. Yes, Adam and Lisa were circling, waiting, plotting, but for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their demands. I was preparing for them. And when the next battle came, because I knew it would, I was determined to face it not as a victim, but as a man who had finally rediscovered his strength. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, tucked into my mailbox like any ordinary piece of mail. But when I opened it, my hands began to tremble. It was a court summons. Adam and Lisa had filed a petition to have me declared ... mentally incompetent and to assign them as my legal guardians. For a long moment, I just stood there in my hallway, staring at the paper as if it might dissolve if I glared hard enough. My own son, my blood, was dragging me to court to strip me of my rights. I called Mr. Weber immediately. His voice was steady, calm, almost reassuring. "Richard, I told you this might happen. Don't panic. We'll fight this, but you have to be ready. They'll come with stories, false witnesses, anything to make you look unstable." "I'm ready," I said, though my stomach twisted into knots. The day of the hearing, the courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. I wore the same pale blue suit I had once bought for Adam's wedding, the one that had never been worn. Today it wasn't for celebration, it was for battle. When I entered the courtroom, Adam and Lisa were already seated at the petitioner's table. Lisa's hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, as if she were attending a gala. Adam looked tired but rehearsed, his expression one of practiced concern. Beside them sat Fisher, their lawyer, smug as ever. When they saw me, Lisa put on a show, whispering in Adam's ear, glancing back at me with a sad shake of her head, as though I were already lost. Weber leaned toward me. "Don't react to them, let them perform. The truth will come out." The judge entered, a stern woman with sharp eyes that seemed to read through every layer of deception. "This hearing is to determine whether Richard Richter is capable of managing his own affairs. Petitioners, you may proceed." Fisher stood first, his voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, my clients Adam and Lisa Richter are deeply concerned for Mr. Richter's welfare. Over the past year, they have observed troubling behavior, forgetfulness, financial recklessness, emotional instability. We have reason to believe he is no longer able to responsibly manage his finances." He gestured toward me as though I were an exhibit. "This is not about greed, it is about care. They love him and they want to ensure he is safe." Safe. The word tasted rotten. Lisa was the first to testify. She walked to the witness stand with the grace of a seasoned actress. "Richard has always been generous," she began, her voice trembling, "but in the past year his decisions have become erratic. He forgets conversations, repeats the same questions, sometimes even forgets where he's put his money. He once gave us money for rent twice in the same week, and when we tried to return it, he accused us of lying." A perfect lie wrapped in sincerity. Adam followed, his voice heavy with false regret. "Dad has changed since Mom passed. He's not himself, he forgets birthdays, mixes up dates, gets angry over little things. We're scared he'll lose everything he worked for. We just want to help him, Your Honor. We just want to protect him from himself." Their words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they had just enough of reality mixed in to sound believable. Yes, I forgot a birthday card once. Yes, grief had made me short-tempered some days. But to twist those flaws into proof of madness? That was cruelty of the worst kind. Weber rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Richter, you claim my client is forgetful. You claim my client is forgetful. Do you also claim he was forgetful when he wired you over Sir Bod's Lingwin rent money on time every month for 3 years?" Lisa faltered. "Well, no, but..." "And that $C her backed in groceries? The $R in Wooback car loan? The $R back for furniture?" The jewelry, the vacations, the emergency bills, was he forgetful then? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Weber turned to Adam. You said your father repeats questions. Tell me, Adam, do you repeat requests? Because according to these bank statements, you asked for money almost weekly. Were those conversations signs of his confusion or your dependence? The judge raised an eyebrow. Adam's face reddened. Then it was my turn. Weber called me to the stand. My heart pounded, but I stood tall, Mr. Richter. Weber began gently. Can you tell the court why you decided to cut off financial support to your son and his wife? I took a breath because I realized love isn't measured in dollars. For 3 years, I gave them everything I had. Rent, food, loans, gifts, $33,400. And in return, they gave me nothing but distance. They didn't invite me to my own son's wedding. When I stopped paying, suddenly I was confused. But I'm not confused. I'm awake. The courtroom was silent. Even Fisher shifted uncomfortably. Weber presented medical evaluations from my doctor, confirming my cognitive health. Then Eleanor, my neighbor, testified about the night Adam and Lisa had stormed into my house with Fisher, trying to pressure me into signing papers. He wasn't confused, she said firmly. He was standing up for himself. Charlie, my barber, even showed up. If he's confused, then so am I, he joked. He sat in my chair last week, knew exactly what he wanted, and told me stories I could never forget. That's not confusion, that's clarity. One by one, people who had no stake in my money, no reason to lie, painted the picture of a man who was not broken, only betrayed. Fisher tried to recover. Your Honor, these witnesses may mean well, but they cannot speak to the subtle decline of an aging mind. We urge you to err on the side of caution. The judge fixed him with a piercing stare. Mr. Fisher, what I see is not subtle decline. What I see is 2 adults attempting to exploit their father under the guise of care. She turned her gaze to Adam and Lisa. You've taken over Sender's-a-ling from this man in 3 years, and now that he's cut you off, you claim he's incompetent? That is not guardianship, that is greed. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The petition is denied. Mr. Richter retains full control of his finances. This case is dismissed. The words washed over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Adam's jaw clenched. Lisa's face crumpled, not with grief, but with rage. Fisher gathered his papers quickly, as if eager to flee the sinking ship. I didn't look at them as I left. I didn't need to. The fight was over. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor hugged me, tears in her eyes. You did it, Richard. You got your life back. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger, freer. Not because I had won against Adam and Lisa, but because I had finally won back myself. The day after the trial, I woke to sunlight pouring through my curtains. For once, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt like permission to breathe, to move forward, to live. I sold the house a month later. The walls carried too many echoes of slammed doors and whispered arguments, of sacrifices made in silence. Instead, I bought a modest apartment in the city, close enough to the park, the library, and a little cafe that served the best black coffee I'd ever tasted. The first morning I moved in, I stood at my window overlooking the bustling street below. Strangers hurried past, each lost in their own world. No one expected me to solve their problems. No one demanded my savings. I was just another man in the crowd, and for the first time in years, that anonymity felt like freedom. With the money I had saved by cutting Adam and Lisa off, I booked my first trip abroad. Paris, the city my late wife had always dreamed of visiting. I carried one of her scarves in my suitcase, and when I stood at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, I held it up to the wind and whispered, "We made it, love." For the first time since losing her, I didn't feel only grief. I felt her pride, her presence in the joy of the moment. Travel became my therapy. Spain, Italy, Greece, each place reminded me that the world was bigger than the cage I had built around myself. I wasn't too old, I wasn't too late. My life hadn't ended when Adam turned his back. It had only just begun again, but I didn't just live for myself. With Weber's guidance, I began donating part of my savings to organizations that protected seniors from financial exploitation. If my story could help one other person see the warning signs, then my pain had meaning. I gave not out of guilt, not out of fear of losing love, but out of choice. And choice, I realized, is the purest form of freedom. Back home, I built a small circle of friends. Eleanor introduced me to her walking group, and on crisp mornings we'd stroll together through the park, swapping stories of the lives we'd once lived and the lessons we'd finally learned. Some of them had been through betrayals of their own. We laughed, we cried, but most of all, we understood each other. In the evenings, I returned to my sketching. My hands weren't as steady as they once were, but the lines came alive just the same. Landscapes, city streets, portraits of strangers I'd met along the way. Every drawing felt like a piece of myself stitched back together. Sometimes I thought of Adam, of the boy who used to climb trees in our backyard, the boy who once hugged me so tightly after his first bike ride that I thought my ribs might crack. That boy was gone, replaced by a man I no longer recognized. And though a part of me would always mourn that loss, I finally understood something vital. I couldn't keep bankrupting myself for the memory of a child who no longer existed. I had given him love, support, and chance after chance. The rest was his journey. Mine at last was my own. Standing one evening on my balcony, I watched the sunset burn the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I thought about everything I had endured, the sacrifices, the humiliation, the courtroom battles, and yet here I stood, not broken, not defeated, but alive. The truth had revealed itself in the harshest way possible, but it had also set me free. This second assertion, love that can be bought with money is not love at all. Respect that must be begged for is not respect. And dignity? Dignity is the one thing no one can take from you, unless you hand it over. I would never hand mine over again.